Today, Ardnaso said the latest DRMS still doesn't have the popcorn editor from twilacs. Then, on like my lunch break or something, I replied and said, if you want to copy it over and make a pull request, I'd be fine merging it in. Since it's entirely possible Blizzard might shut down Reforged in the next year or two, though, I probably don't want to spend my time to develop a feature that I would not use, though. So that was me on my lunch break. And to be honest, I feel like sometimes I actually say things like that because I basically just I'm being lazy and I don't really feel like doing something or even thinking about doing something when I'm on my lunch break. And what I really should focus on and what I go and focus on after saying something like that is actually my job and not this stuff, because I like to take my job really seriously and not think about this stuff during the day as much as humanly possible. Although, as you can see, I did happen to look at that comment on Discord during my lunch break. So, with that in mind, now that it's my evening and I can do whatever I want, I thought it would be kind of funny to try to see if we could take 10 minutes and do whatever Ardenaso is asking for here. Not because I consider it to be a particularly good idea or disagree with the statement that Blizzard at some point might get rid of whatever our stuff, but basically, I was just thinking that it would be nice when people want features in Retera Model Studio. This is a program that I still kind of like to see as a living work in some sense. That we still fix things, we still add things. Why not? Everyone should be able to add things. Hopefully, the twilac version will keep growing and all of its goodness and all that kind of stuff. So, as I understand it, the shader render version of twilac, I guess, is maybe the newest one. I'm never quite sure on this. I haven't really followed the twilac one too closely. But anyway, so I'm clicking as I'm talking through some of these viewers here. But as I'm sure you know, the deep within this, the organization structure of twilac is itself completely different than the old DRMS version. And after helping to create this different organization structure, I was thinking that what we have here is better, but I also consider it to be never finished. I would have gotten rid of this GUI/model edit thing and spread it amongst the other organized things if I had continued contributing to 0.05. At some point, I just got fed up with the changes and just kind of decided to continue this fork off, the RMS 4.4 DRMS thing that we talk about now. It's just me being lazy. I mean, at some point, maybe that'll get better than it is. But I'm just kind of clicking around here while I'm talking without thinking as much as maybe I should. Obviously, I feel like what we really want to do is basically find the model panel. And it looks like that's pretty much what we have here. So obviously, there's this concept of node panels, it looks like, in the twilac one. I never even got that far. There aren't even node panels at all, really, in the old DRMS. So that's kind of fun. And then you see like the popcorn panel here. So obviously that's kind of fun that this exists. I bet if you copy it directly, it's just going to explode. But we could try to copy it directly for our own entertainment and see what happens. So if we go to the component material panel thing, sure. That's a thing. But there's also, what is it, like components panel. One of these things has like a card panel. Which is different than the tree model component browser tree that actually I think tells this thing what to do. And so this is where like there's all these empty listeners that twilac probably filled in. Like what happens if you select a particle emitter? Right now, nothing. It just doesn't do anything. But you could imagine going in here and saying, okay, so here are component editors, they're like float panels or something, and basically say, wouldn't it be nice to have like nodes, components.nodes or something kind of similar to what we have in the twilac view. And the problem again is that this is not even invented at all. Like there are no node views. There was nothing in the old version that I like to kick around with to do anything like that. And so at some point, there are just a lot of reasons why it's completely incompatible. Like the library is getting used, whatever this float editor is just like completely incompatible. And we could try to just copy it over, but I don't know, like at some point that's probably gonna hit a wall. RMS util. Sure, let's try to copy the RMS util twi text thing, whatever that is. Twi text editor. Yeah, here we go. Twi text editor. What is this? Editor helpers. Okay. I'm just curious if this will work. I'm not necessarily certain that this will actually work, but it's kind of interesting to wonder about. If we dump the source, you can dump source in the source folder up there, and see this again, like the whole concept of what is this editor model, global sequence, anim flags, like the fundamental concept of opening a model file is different on the twilac version. It's like opening it with war smash. There's just like hundreds of errors in just the concept of an editor, of a text editor, even to change a number box. So I guess that's where you get back to like what I probably would do if I was spending more than 20 minutes on this is to reinvent the whole thing. And that's gross. I mean, that's a like a technology malfeasance or something. Not really what does the word malfeasance actually mean? Wait a minute. Google. Define malfeasance. Now I'm curious. What is that saying? Misconduct or wrongdoing, especially by a public official. Well, I'm not a public official, but I would say that it's software design misconduct to have to do something twice that you shouldn't have to do twice. One would think that it was that way. So obviously that's interesting. And it's kind of a problem because if I put this in here, like it's just not. I already regret pasting in this editor helpers thing. I don't think this is going to work. You can see it's in a totally different folder that's not at all part of anything really. So what is the point of this really? Like if we look back at it and say, what is it trying to do? These were probably what I had called float value panels, which honestly might have been copied from twilac once before at this point. It's been a little while and I start to forget, but I think that's what these are. So maybe I should save myself the time and just basically assume that I am going to do some amount of rewriting of this because I think it's likely impossible. There is no component ID object panel, so that's another problem. The fundamental type of component ID object panel is something we want to get. If I can go back, node panels, component ID object panel. Cool. So this thing is another thing that has like the base concept of a node. Nodes are called ID objects in some of my RMS code, so I can see that probably didn't really change. So I guess we have to solve that one for starters. And that's where, what is this? Like, so there's a twilac version, but probably component editor text field was my version, I assume. Looks like this extended component panel though, which is interesting because that's different than how it is on mine at some fundamental level. So it's back to where I feel like twilac probably rewrote like all of this stuff to where only the base concept of what even exists is remotely similar. So I guess the twilac one is trying to have this abstract base class of a component panel that has a couple of method utilities on it, as well as the ability to set what is selected to some degree. And I'm not quite sure. I guess this gets back to, if you look at the ones I'd been making, like component animation panel, this probably has set animation. Yeah. And if you look at component bitmap panel, it has set bitmap. And if you look at component material header panel, maybe it has set material. This one is, yeah, set material. So the component panels that I had been making, it is true what twilac is doing, that you can distill a simpler abstract concept out of these and then try to reduce the amount of code by making them all share that. Like you could see why the direction the twilac version is going is smart, as far as reducing the amount of code that you have and hopefully reducing the maintenance that you have to do to manage it. To some extent, the fact that the twilac version has all of those changes is probably why introducing this feature is something that they could do, whereas if I sit here and try to do it in 20 minutes, I just get annoyed and I probably don't finish. But it's interesting, I guess, to think about how, what is this distinction. So like my component panel, my concept of the general panel was kept as a simple functional interface with only a single function, apparently, that was just the save function. And I guess the idea there is probably that when you navigate away from the panel, that I would save. Do I even call this function? I feel like my code editor's lying to me and telling me that this isn't ever used. So like component material panel, maybe. Well, honestly, some of these, I think you touch buttons on them and they don't even work. I do use my animation panel. Okay, so like, does this have save? It doesn't. It's not even a component panel. Wait a minute. What is a component panel then? Component bitmap panel. It has a save function. Who calls it? Nothing. It doesn't do anything. Okay, so this is like, the whole concept is like not really finished, probably. And that gets back to, I mean, that's weird. The components panel. Maybe when you select something, it would say, so just like, basically like the amount of work that twilac did in this stuff is probably extraordinary, because it basically amounts to taking a prototype that I was writing that looks as though I wish I had this, and then trying to actually build it. And so the idea that mine, oops, I forgot it, is not really a matter of that. It isn't. They're completely incompatible. The twilac one is basically rewritten, and it's rewritten to make it possible to do the things that mine wished that it was doing. So I don't know. Just download the twilac version, maybe. So then you get back to, would I put those features in if I had the time? Sure, I think I would like to do that. Probably I should have answered Ardonaso differently. This is a stupid thing that I replied with to just make some troll jab at Blizzard, instead of saying that, if I sit down with 10 minutes and try to do this, it's just going to make me realize how much work twilac has done on this project and how I don't feel like doing it because it's duplicate work and I'd rather do something else new and interesting that might be mildly useful. So that's kind of my takeaway on that. And it gets into where, like, to integrate the twilac version, and to do that, these other weird, incomplete, strange things like component bitmap panel, which apparently has like a save thing that doesn't do anything, which doesn't really make sense, because I'm pretty sure that if I run it, and now it's going to complain to me because it's twilac code that's pasted in not finished, but I'm pretty sure that if I run the actual program, it does save what I do in the bitmap panel. So it doesn't even make any sense that there's a save function whose implementation is to do nothing. But just in premise, a better answer to Ardonaso is not that I am completely unwilling to incorporate these kinds of features, but actually, what on earth? What the fudge? Oh, yeah. Okay. No, I think I know what that is. This is not the twilac code, actually, that's breaking. I broke something else. I was playing with a file called Retera cask utils, and I changed this magic boolean from true to false, and if I change it back to true, we'll be able to run. I'll be able to keep talking. Okay, great. Yeah, so don't worry about that, but basically the premise that I'm trying to make is that there's a better answer. There's a better answer to what Ardonaso is saying, and the better answer isn't that I'm not going to do this for you because I want to make some jabs at Blizzard or somehow protest against HD models and make everyone feel bad. That's really not. I probably shouldn't say that way. I think that's kind of just like having a moment where I look at this stuff and I should be focused on work, and I think to myself, why am I looking at this stuff? I should just go back to work. And I just write some bish bosh and go back to what I'm doing. But there is actually like this technical reason, because I want to say bitmap panel, like we were saying, if I change this replaceable ID to 0 and hit enter or something, like it does, like that does save. So on premise, like the code is misleading. This is the kind of stuff that twilac probably says is like some royal spaghetti or something. Like the component panel like has this save function, and then like the bitmap panel we were just in, save function doesn't do anything, so like it doesn't save. But then actually it does save, because if you look at the replaceable ID spinner that I was just clicking on, like the act of clicking on that to change it literally just creates this like action and then calls redo on the redo undo action and sticks it in the undo redo stack. So I guess that also means that you could control Z and it would go back. Great. So like the control Z works, that's great, but it doesn't fundamentally. Well, there's a couple things wrong with it, but yeah, it doesn't call this save function, and so it's kind of like, why does the save function even exist? And maybe the original idea, probably the original idea of the save function would be that if you click like the material and bitmap and back and forth, and like I start typing here without pushing enter, and then I click back on the bitmap, maybe it would call the save function when I unselect one of them or something like that. And it just doesn't, because I didn't finish it. And that gets back to where I guess as I was building the Retera Model Studio stuff, I've really never considered it finished, and I would be great if it was finished, right? And maybe the twilac one is closer to that than the one that I was building. But then it gets back to like I had this program from like 2017 into 2018, and I think it might have been 2019 when I actually published a version of Retera Model Studio that people download and use. So like throughout the year of 2018, maybe it was late 2018, throughout the year of 2018, I had this program, and there would be people doing modeling tasks in Warcraft 3, and I would almost just like, I don't know, poke fun at them and say, I have something way better than what you're using, but it's not done, and so I've never published it. And so when you ask me to do it, I get it done faster than you, nah. And like, it's not a good way for that to be. And so at some point, like, I sort of go against what I wanted and like go against this idea that here's this ongoing project that I wish was finished and it's not finished and there's more to do. But basically just by giving people what I had, by giving them that ability to use it, I think that more was possible than what would have been otherwise. And obviously that leads to things like people trying to contribute and getting frustrated by the limits of what's currently there, the kind of stuff we just saw, and then like getting twilac to build all these extraordinarily elaborate changes, because to some level with some things like this model panel with all these components in it and whatever, twilac probably basically rewrote the entire thing. I mean, I think that would be a reasonable assumption at this point. And because like I click geosets, they don't even do anything. Like you click on nodes, they don't do anything. That's not a bug. It's because there is nothing. Like there is nothing to do. When I go to components panel, I created functions. What happens if you select a geoset? What happens if you select a helper? There's no graphical component to show. There's nothing that it does. It's a do nothing function because I just didn't finish it. And the twilac version like tries to take those functions and they're taking kind of this prototype idea that I had and taking it farther and faster than I've taken it. And so when I think about implementing the same thing, rather than doing some horrible amount of like copying their stuff into my stuff and trying to reconcile that, which is definitely physically possible, I am more inclined to think, why not let that exist in the form it does? And instead of some extremely elaborate reconciliation project that would basically amount to duplicate work, what if I just build it to the vision of however I feel like building it and see what we get? And then it helps us brainstorm different ways to do things. Another example I was thinking about with that is like in the idea of dynamic, like if I set this to be a Bezier curve in the, what is this, not even a node, this is still on the material. Do we know which material this is? I doubt that. Did that save me changing it to a Bezier curve? Okay, no, and linear, and no. So this alpha dynamic thing, this doesn't even work. Like if you've ever had that work, then you were using the twilac version, because I literally never invented it to work. Like I just wish that it did. I just drew a box on the screen that said static or dynamic with a check thing and was like, I wish that this worked. And at some point in the twilac one, like I think these delete icons actually delete things. Like you can actually go in here and, I don't know, can I change this? No. And something that occurred to me in seeing that is that I tend to believe when you have these dynamic animated things, like the dynamic alpha of this particular guts layer as it fades, rather than these time values, which you can sort of already edit that in Notepad, I find that it would probably be better to let those get edited in a timeline so that I can say, let's go to like, what is it, the decay animations, and maybe I need to zoom out to find them, but you zoom out and you try to find, let's go to here, like this decay animation, and you go to the geoset animation, and maybe you find your alpha track in here. Sorry, not even a geoset animation. We were looking at a material. So let's say that's the peasant layer. Here's the guts layer. Yeah. The alpha layer of this guts thing. So like if I zoom this out and we see like what's going on in here, you can see that over the course of this animation, like it starts to like fade out or something. Actually, no, I think it fades in. Sorry. And I just messed up my zoom really badly. But in concept, here you go. You can see the fade as it fades in. And so I started thinking, wouldn't it be smarter if you're going to edit these, that this would be something you could just click and like drag around and visually see, and then maybe you right click that, and then you could do this sort of text editing kind of thing like this. Because if you wanted to edit them in a little box like this, like it's just going to be easier if you just go to the text view of the material and you just go to this, because now I can just like copy 3 of them and make 6 of them and whatever, and like it just that's been working for me for 20 years. Like, why do I need this little text box thing? The original concept of why I started building this is for all those people who are like stuck on Mangos and can't handle a text view. But like it just, in concept, it makes sense to me. Why not have me just do what I'm gonna do, and the twilac version does what it's gonna do, and then we don't have to spend all this time copying this stuff in that probably is like completely different or ideologically different in how it's written, and uses a different model parser at the end result of the formatting that it's even trying to change. It just seems like doing that, I don't know, is that creating a better product, or is that disrespectful to the twilac product? Like at the end of the day, would it be better, like why do that, right? Like if that version is what it should be and what is the future, then it would be smarter to just copy into that version whatever it is we think that this version has that one doesn't. And so I tried that too, and what I realized is there are really basic fundamental things, like how right now if I go in my preferences window, I'm on patch 131. I was testing with patch 131. Normally that doesn't work. I'm building it from source, and I changed that magic flag you guys saw earlier that lets me open patch 131. Normally you can't do that. Normally it only opens Reforged Cask. But sure, so I was on patch 131. And now let's say I want to go back to this really old, some old patch. It's a lot like patch 126, like some old version of Warcraft 3. And I switch the MPQs to that, right? When I click OK, it just does it. It just is like, OK, and it refreshes all the data, and it drops the caches, and it reloads the stuff that's in here. And if I clear that, and now I'm like, you know what? I changed my mind. Let's go to Reforge. And I think I have Reforged on this computer. What is that in? Did they put in x86? No, I guess they were smart about it. They moved it to non-x86. All right, cool. So where'd it go? Are you kidding me? No, I do somewhere have Reforged. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I scrolled past. Here we go. All right, so here's I think this is Reforged. So I click this Reforged install. Inconsistent sides, all you can see, because obviously you can't use the Reforged install when I have that magic flag, so that's a problem. So I guess that's kind of ruined the point I was trying to make. But basically, the weird cask flag aside, like right now, if I go back to this Warcraft data thing and I clear this and I add like that weird old patch from way back, here we go, this thing, add that, cool. So like now this will reload, I'll have the units. Let's try opening a peasant again. Okay, it's opening a peasant. Great. So this is the old peasant. He's in like, what is this? Format version 800. Like looking at an old Warcraft. And now I'm gonna go to like Warcraft data, clear that out, add an install, and can it just be C program files Warcraft 3? I'm gonna get there faster if I just type this. I know that that's my Reforged install. Probably, unless, I don't know, some other bug is going on. Did that not? Apparently not. Okay. Sure. I guess, what is it really doing here? Why does it do that? All right. It was an x86. Sorry, I should remember that. I've been talking while I'm working here. So basically, like I open Reforged, and like I've been looking at the SD stuff, and boom, now I'm looking at the Reforged stuff, and I open the peasant, and it's like, boom, here's a Reforged peasant. And maybe Twilight figured that out. But basically, my experience looking at the Twilight version like a year ago or something, when I thought, why don't I just go to that one and like whatever I like in this one, I'll just put in that one. It will be done. Um, what I was finding is that the fundamental data handlers that handle this concept of like loading the old and the new and jumping back and forth like I just did not do that. Like upon changing what it was loading, I had to close the whole program and open it again. And I thought, okay, why is that? Obviously, the Twilight one started from a solution that does what I just did, and like at what point did it regress so that that didn't work? And when I got into the weeds of it and how it regressed, like the changes, they're all volunteer works, right? And at some point, the code that I wrote to handle that stuff and to persist it when we close and open the program was based on like a game I was writing in the year 2013 for like persisting game settings, and I just copied it into Retera Model Studio, and all the names and the way that it's laid out are not great, and it doesn't save to like a text file that you could just go and deal with. Like it saves to this stupid binary file that it's dang convenient in code to handle it, but like if your human wants to go understand it or like why is it doing this, it's stupid. Like if I go to, okay, what is this? Percent app data? Percent app data, and somewhere in app data, yeah, Retera Studio, user profile, this stupid file. And if I open this stupid file, we're not gonna be able to read this. It's just like it's garbage. Like you can see there's some manner of like, okay, what is this? Something something Hive Workshop program preferences, something something, some kind of array list. Show the vertex controls, load the portraits, texture the models. Like there's a bunch of stuff in here. It's basically whatever you find in the other thing. And then what there's like some cask data source product. What is that? Some of the ENUS Warcraft mod things. So like basically it's there. The file exists, and at some point, again getting back to this idea that this is a system maintained by volunteers, Twilac went in there and it's like somebody said, can you add this and that to make it persist that and that? And it was like, sure. And then somebody else was like, well, now it's like forgetting what it persisted previously. Could you go in there and fix it? And there were these insane assumptions based on the idea that even just a flag of turning something on and off or like a number would, instead of on and off, be a three state that had a yes or a no or doesn't exist. And then it turns out that if it doesn't exist, there was a special function called when it would load that would make it exist. So it did exist most of the time, but not always. And it's like Twilight was getting fed up with that stuff, rightly so, and copied it, like trying to make a better one, and then ended up, I think, like using both of them or something. And so like it just, when I go to that, and like even though it is reasonable to ideologically question the junk that was there, like I know that junk. I've been using it for 9 years. Like it does what I want it to do. When I add a new setting to Retera Model Studio and publish it, the new setting like is backwards compatible. Like you'd still load your old settings, and then now you can just set the new setting. And the thing about the three state non-existent gets used to be if it was like you're loading the new version of Retera Model Studio and you've never loaded the old one before. And so there are these cases that I've thought about, and like even though the code is really hard to read, and even though it's weird and this nonsense that creates a Java class that you just see this class, but then it actually auto converts it to these binary files and then auto converts it back, and it uses some existing library within Java for that. So there's not even like a thing where you could read about how it's converting. Like that crap annoyed Twilac in trying to support legitimate users and make legitimate technology progress forward, and led to the thing where the Twilac version has some weird, more complicated version of how it handles that stuff, or did a year ago when I looked at it. But for me as a volunteer, then, like I am not very incentivized to spend hours reconciling like a 2 steps forward and 1 step back solution that has some oversight in it. Just something Twilac didn't think of over the process of kind of trying to basically reinvent something to fix a legitimate problem that was there in some spaghetti code that isn't clear to someone else who comes to read it, unless if it's like me reading it. And so I don't I don't really feel at liberty to say that the twilac version is wrong. Like if I went to that and was like, oh, here's my better version, I got annoyed at it and just pasted mine back in there. Like I would feel like a troll, like making things harder for the people that have like the best kind of volunteer who's worked the hardest on this project. And so that's kind of where I don't I see that there is a technology problem and that the user base says, why can't you just take these two pieces that have been forked apart for 2 years and put them together again? But if somebody asks me to make a Warcraft model, or if I want to make a Warcraft model, there's a much higher payoff for me if I just fire up the old legacy code of mine from the year 2020, this forked off version 4, as we call it, or DRMS, as sometimes I was joking about. It's the Demon Retera Model Studio because it's demonic for me to not move forward a new version. But just in concept, like, there is a sort of brain heuristic, pragmatic reason why I use this version that I have and haven't moved forward with the other people who moved forward for a good reason. But yeah, so I guess that's my those are my thoughts that I run into, the actual more accurate thoughts when I try to do what Ardenasa was suggesting. And that doesn't mean I won't do it. Maybe later somebody will copy it all. But then we need to answer that ideological question. Is it a respect of the work into the version 5, into the twilac versions, to rip parts out of it and put them in the old one instead of like accepting the new version as the future and iterating on it to make it even better? But I don't feel like I want to go into these data loading, program persistent settings and try to make some claim about how mine is so much better that I'm just going to delete the twilac one and put mine back in there and keep the rest of the twilac version, because it just, that also seems kind of like trolling. Like it isn't, I don't know, just sometimes people just have their own different ideas how to do things. And it seems to me to be subjective. Maybe Twilac would just say, well, it's not subjective, it's just better. Maybe it is. I don't know. But like, for whatever reason, like, I would like it if the Twilac version, when I go in these preference settings and I just change what data I'm loading and then I click OK, would do what mine was doing here, where you go straight from the old one to the reforged one and it just reloads seamlessly. And the only reason it does that is because I call like 10 different functions of like, well, clear this cache and clear that cache and reset this and reset that. That is kind of dumb, but I knew at the time when I was making it, like, those are the caches that I have to clear in order to do this. So I guess that's my frustration, that in trying to fix it or iterate on it, independent volunteers, different places, different times. I think there was like, sometimes maybe Twilac was doing like some Discord calls and talking to people and working on stuff, and I joined like one of them to chat for a little bit, but it wasn't at a time in my life when I had time to be contributing, and so I was basically like a troll. And it's not really intentional, it's what happens. So that's that. And anyway, on the bright side, by explaining all of this, maybe I've enlightened a little bit that I'm not actually sitting here plotting for some future where Blizzard deletes Reforged. I heard a rumor once that somebody asked them to do that, and they said no, they're going to keep Reforged running. So if you look at it from that standpoint, apparently they want it to keep running. How about that? But anyway, yeah, so I don't know, is what it is, but it looks like I didn't code anything. So maybe someone will at least be entertained by my verbalizing thought processes on Retera Model Studio versions 4 and versions 5.